Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Dybdahl, and I'm a senior here at Walla Walla University. And I will be speaking today about my time as a student missionary. I know last week we had some speakers at Nuestra, but today it's time for Circle Church. So I really like the story of the demoniac in Luke chapter 8. Jesus is met by a man possessed by many demons. The man has been tormented for a long time. Jesus sends the demons out of the man, and his life is completely changed. In other Bible stories, Jesus tells people to follow him after he changes their lives. But in this case, Jesus tells the man, return to your home and declare how much God has done for you. My story is quite different from the demoniac's in many ways, but I have returned home and I have the opportunity to share with all of you how much God has done for me during my time of service. So I have just 3 stories to share with you, and then after each story, a lesson or a reflection that hopefully we can all take away. But first, I thought I would share a little bit about how I ended up as a student missionary and what my life was like as a student missionary. So COVID pushed me to want to leave. I was really tired of staring at my computer screen, and I wanted to be brave and do something hard. The doors miraculously opened, and I went to Ubon Ratchathani, Thailand during the 21-22 school year. I had to quarantine for 2 weeks when I arrived in Bangkok, and I was not looking forward to this because I felt like COVID had taken away any resiliency that I might have had. And so being alone for 2 weeks, I think was going to be really hard. But I think that God knew this, and he put 2 friends in my life. I got connected with 2 other people from Burma that had come to the United States, but were now returning to the Thai-Burmese border to be missionaries. I was able to get my final flight to Bangkok with them in the same quarantine hotel as them. They ended up staying right above me in the hotel room, and they had friends in Bangkok, so they would get a bunch of snacks and put it in a plastic bag, tie it to a phone cord, and lower it down to me during quarantine. It was really nice. They got me a SIM card for my phone. They would call me on the phone to chat, and they ended up taking me after quarantine to the next airport so I could get to my final destination. So God knew exactly what I needed, and he gave me 2 friends to make quarantine actually pleasurable. So I ended up at Ubon Adventist International Mission School, and I was a teacher's assistant there for grade 1. And being a teacher's assistant meant that I was in charge of classroom management, which is just about the worst job you could possibly have as a teacher. I had to be assertive, direct, and tell people what to do, which is something that I did not like, nor did I feel I was good at first, but I got a lot better at. I also taught values class, which was essentially Bible class. And I'd say that 90 to 95% of the students at UAmes had a Buddhist background, so I felt burdened to teach about Jesus in a way that was relevant for them, and I wanted them to have a basic knowledge of God and his love and kindness. So that's a little bit of the backstory, but now I'll get into my stories. The first story is one of unlikely friendship. So one evening, I was running outside of my apartment complex on a little gravel driveway. I couldn't run out on the street because there was a pack of aggressive dogs that would congregate close by to my apartment. And I didn't know this, but in Thailand, you just have to post like on the street that your dog is aggressive, and then if you walk and get attacked, that's on you because they told you it was aggressive. So I didn't go out on the street. I was running when another girl that lived in my apartment complex came back from work on her motorbike. She went up to her room, but then returned a couple minutes later. She saw that I was running and asked, "Do you want to come run with me?" And everything inside of me was like, you probably shouldn't do this. It's nighttime. You're a foreigner. You don't know who this girl is, and she wants to take you someplace. Probably shouldn't do it. But at the same time, I kind of wanted to. And I'm pretty tall, and I thought, I think I could take her, like, if things got iffy. So I was like, all right, let's do this. So I got on the back of her motorbike, and we went screaming down the streets to an undisclosed location. But we arrived at a beautiful park, and that is when I asked for her name, because I had no idea who this girl was. So I was like, what's your name? And she said, name. And I was like, okay, maybe, English is limited for her, Thai is limited for me. So I asked again, what's your name? And she said, no name. And I was like, she doesn't have a name? I was confused. And so I said, no name? And she was like, yes, no Nam. You just take the E away. Her name was No Nam. I was like, oh, okay. So I was confused here. She was right all along. So we walked around a beautiful park, and I got to know No Nam. She was a dietitian at a local hospital in the surrounding area, and she told me that if I ever needed anything, I could come knock on her door, and she would help me. She showed me where she sat by the water at the park when she got lonely. We had a lovely time chatting, and then she dropped me off back at our apartment and gave me some bananas from her family's farm. Just like that, it was over. Kind of a random experience, but it was really meaningful for me. Why? Because I was a foreigner. I so obviously did not fit in. Yet she offered a hand of friendship to me. I was slightly suspicious of her, but she must have been suspicious of me too. Yet she still tried. She saw me, invited me, took me, talked with me, and gave me bananas. Matthew 25:35 says, I was a stranger and you invited me in. As a student missionary, I feel like you can get locked in the missionary or the outreach mindset. One phrase that I repeated during my SM experience that I think I got from my sister was the phrase of, I am but a vessel. And we would say that dramatically whenever we were asked to do something, you'd say, I am but a vessel. And I liked that phrase. I wanted to give myself to God to be of service. But this was a time when someone was a missionary to me. I was a stranger, a foreigner, and she invited me in. And I think that we should do the same. Is there anyone that you need to reach out to today? Someone who is a stranger, but needs to be invited in. My appeal to you is simple, to invite them in. My second story is about my student named Colin. Colin was one of my students that I did not like. And wait, aren't you supposed to like all your students and think they're the greatest? No, I did not like this guy. He was awful. He treated me awful. He had a lot of problems and was extremely violent towards me and other students. If it weren't for Colin, my student missionary experience would have been so much easier. But again, I didn't want to do something easy. I wanted to do something hard. So I guess this was an answer to an unspoken need for growth. But Colin could flip like a switch and all of a sudden attack you with fists. He would decide in a split second that he wanted to go home, and he would bolt for the door. This is where the long missionary skirts came in handy, because you could go into a wide stance, then you couldn't get around, under, over the door, and you were good. But this kid was super smart. He knew how to control those around him. Numerous times he would look me dead in the eye and say, I wanted to kill you. I want to kill you, teacher. And I knew that all, 35 pounds of him was so furious at me. He would kill me if he could. On one of his good days, he waved goodbye to me from the car, and he was waving a huge knife. And I thought, oh my goodness, I probably need to check his backpack when he comes to school. One day he wrote on his board, one day he asked how to spell my name, and I knew he's up to something, and he wrote on his board, like, Teacher Sarah is dumb, or something like that. And of course, as a teacher, like, okay, do I get all upset? I think that's probably what he wants. But he spelled dumb wrong, and I was like, aha, got you there. Yeah. And then he tried it again with stupid. Teacher Sarah's stupid, but this time I changed my tactics, and I was, oh, Colin, your handwriting is so good. Let's take a picture and send it to Mommy. And then right away, he was erasing it, so we were good. I might have lost the war, but I won that battle. Yeah. I don't consider myself an angry person, but this kid made me so mad. I would pray to God in the morning, God, please don't let Colin come to school today. It was draining and kind of humiliating for me to get beat up by a first grader. It was also upsetting that no one really wanted to deal with him. I often felt alone trying to do what I could, and I didn't really know what to do. Where was God in all of this? I think that God slowly began to change my heart a little bit. The more I learned about Colin, the more I could see that this little guy was tormented. He once mentioned that he couldn't sleep because of the ghosts. So he came to school tired, agitated. His behaviors began to present like he had suffered from some severe trauma, spiritual warfare, and a very dysfunctional family system that left both him and his brother not liked by the students and teachers, violent and unable to manage their emotions. But my prayers began to change in the morning. Instead of praying for Colin not to come to school, which I might have still prayed sometimes, I would pray for Colin to have a good day, and I began praying for someone to give Colin a hug before he came to school. Colin did not end up changing much. He had good days and bad days, but I changed. My anger shifted away from Colin and the treatment that he had towards me and the other students, and instead I was angry at who could have hurt my little kid. After spending much time with the student, I felt like I took on the role of a parent. Colin once got a new pen and wrote me a note. This time it was a nice one. He wrote, "I love you, teacher. I love you so much. Teacher, I will be good to you." Colin was mean, and I did not always like him, but I loved him so much. Sometimes God's love is difficult for me to understand. I think that I got a tiny, tiny slice of God's love by experiencing Colin. Despite how much Colin hurt me, my heart was so moved by him and was so soft for him, as evident by that little note. I was just wrapped around his finger after that. I didn't know all of Colin's story, yet how much more does God love us? He who knows our story, why we act out and hurt those around us, yet he still loves us and calls us his children. Romans 5:8 says, "But God shows his love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." When we were at our most unlovable, nastiest, cruel self, God, without hesitation, would die for us. For you, for me, for Colin, and even for our enemy. That's true love. My third story is about San. UAmes was full of wealthy students, which I was not expecting when I went to Thailand, but it was an international school and the tuition was very, very high. Many students were dropped off at the school by uncles, and I thought, oh, that's so sweet, the whole family, is involved. But then I learned that they were hired drivers. It's like, oh, okay. Kids showed up in Gucci. In the past, we even had a kindergartner come to school with a bodyguard because they were such a high government official's child. So you get the idea. All of my students in first grade were wealthy, but San did not present as wealthy. She was one student that had a heart so open to God, it was beautiful to have her come back and ask me questions about Jesus. She was earnest, perceptive, and sweet. And working in a school setting, you get used to being touched randomly by little kids. She was one that found a mole on my arm and then would just be like twiddling my mole as we were talking and be like, what is going on? And then one day at recess, I felt something and she's down at my feet playing with my toenails. And it's like, just random, but you don't get weirded out by it, you just move on. And so, because she was so sweet. I realized how much I loved my students when other students within the class would be mean to each other. I would get upset. And again, I'm not an angry person, right? But I got upset a lot. One instance in particular stands out to me. It was Christmas time, and there's always a big party. Everyone was supposed to bring food for the party, one big gift for the gift exchange, and then 16 small gifts to hand out to each student. Students arrived with fancy food from restaurants, little bags for each student with a sticker of the child's face on it. And as a teacher, I was given some really nice gifts too. Little San's food, however, that she brought was not up to snuff. And the main teacher even said as much in the presence of the kids. Her small gift for each student was also not up to par. Students sat in a big circle, and one student at a time went around distributing their gifts to each person. Little San only had pencils. Not even cool mechanical pencils, but number 2 pencils. It is moments like this when I felt like I understood how parents can feel the pain of their kids more than the kids can sometimes. San went around the class and dropped a pencil in each bag with her head hanging and her shoulders sagging. But San is somehow so relatable for me because I think that I felt like my gifts sometimes are not enough. And have you ever felt like all you have to offer those around you to God is like a number 2 pencil? She couldn't bring cool food to the party. Her gift was too cheap, too small, too basic. And not just her gift, but San herself. She didn't have the style and display of wealth like the other students. But God is so amazing that he can take our pencil and create something beautiful out of it. I think that not feeling adequate or not having a certain skill set is something that many people can struggle with and feel like holds them back from God's plan for them. I don't know how to evangelize. I don't have medical experience. I don't speak multiple languages. I don't have a lot of money. I don't even have a college degree. But God does not need any of that. Like the widow at the temple who only had 2 coins, offer what little you might have to God, and he will use it, enhance it, multiply it, all for his glory. Give God your pencil, and he will treasure it. During my SM experience, I had to learn to give things to God. The first thing I remember doing this with was my time. I was fatigued and sometimes not cheerful at the end of the day. Angela, my friend, was going through a lot and needed someone to talk to. My social stamina was so low that I was not giving Angela what she needed. So I decided to give my time to God. Not surprisingly, everything changed for the better after that. So I speak with authority on this issue that when you give something to God, he will take better care of it than you can. So in conclusion, my student missionary experience was full of ups and downs, good days and bad days. Through it all, I learned so much about myself and my shortcomings, as well as God and his power, his love, and his control. My student missionary time taught me that you can try to do life on your own, but it will be exhausting. When I gave my time, my tiredness, my frustrations, Colin, to God, I was renewed, transformed, and had the ability to do more. God also put people in my life at random times who were missionaries to me. This Sabbath, I hope that you will look for those around you to invite in. Accept God's love as well as share God's love with others, even if they are sometimes unlovely. And finally, that you give what you have, even if it's ordinary, to God, and he will treasure it. Thank you so much for listening to me. Happy Sabbath.